Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. In China, you often hear this term called Tofu Dreg. Buildings and bridges crumble like they're made of tofu crumbs. Recently, a gym in northeast China collapsed while an entire female volleyball team was practicing, and another Tofu Dreg building situation. Tofu Dreg is a collective term describing a construction mindset that Chinese contractors have. It's morally corrupt. It's skipping out on a number of needed processes to try to save money. The term tofu dreg refers to the leftover pieces of tofu, which are crumbs. So in a literal sense, it is referring to videos like these, where you see that what is supposed to be a strong column or wall easily cracked or crushed like fine dust. And this issue on one part is due to subpar construction. But the bigger reason why it happens in China is because of systemic corruption from the Chinese Communist Party. Take the Qiqihar city gym collapse, for example. It happened this week. It's allegedly due to the heavy amount of construction material left on the rooftop. Bags of perlite will absorb water and become heavy. And since the roof of the gym isn't built to sustain heavy weight on top, the weight caused the roof structure to come down. And many were inside. But people wonder who left the bags of material there against building codes. And why isn't anybody being held accountable for this? Local officials of the Chinese Communist Party are pushing all the blames away from the building managers, the schools, the local government, or even the contractors to the parents who just lost their kids. Because they're all part of the ecosystem of corruption, from getting the building contract to the sourcing of materials to completion. It's a whole situation involving bribery, connection, and politics. But let's leave the aftermath for now. How exactly does tofu dreg happen? Well, for example, builders will mix subpar cement to make the concrete mix, resulting in something like this, which is to save on cost. Or simply skip out on the amount of building material for the foundation or other parts of the building, like columns. Or simply not digging deep enough to skimp on the amount of mix needed for pouring the foundation. Now, tofu dreg can be extended to anything that is cheaply made infrastructure, like roads, bridges, hospitals, and more. And this term is so widely known in China because it's not just some financial issue. It's been the reason hundreds of thousands have died. Let's go back to the gym collapse, for example. The response from the Chinese officials is always the same: blame the victims. And this time they're telling the parents of the victims, girls from the volleyball team, to sign a waiver stating that they will not cause any more social uproar and that they will stay silent before they're allowed to see their kids' bodies. And this tells us all we need to know about how evil the CCP is. When a man-made disaster like this happens, the first response, the thinking immediately isn't to how do we give the families their peace and quiet. It's to how do we blame and keep things as under the table as possible. There is no accountability here, and people are just like ants waiting to be squished. Throughout this video, you'll notice a pattern. Whenever natural disasters happen, or in the case of this roof collapse, as long as the Chinese Communist Party officials can get away, they don't really care what happens to the rest of the people. That's not all. The most infamous was the 2008 earthquake in Wenchuan. The 8.0 magnitude earthquake toppled many buildings, including many schools. And Chinese officials' report claimed that 69,000 people were killed and about 17,000 were missing in Sichuan, the province, as the result of the Wenchuan earthquake. The final figure given by the CCP authorities for the number of students killed was about 6,376, with about 1,274 missing, and about another 1,100 were buried in the collapsed school building. So adding all of those up to only about 8,750. Of course, the numbers are very much likely under or contracted to what the actual amount would be. And some people claim that an upward of 300,000 people died, including 30,000 of them are students. Many of them are kindergartners. Within minutes of the earthquake, the entire buildings would reduce to rubble. And many parts of the world, we know that schools tend to be the most safe or the most earthquake-resistant buildings in the area. In the 2008 earthquake in Wenchuan, they were the first to collapse. Now, that became infamous with the tofu dreg construction. Now, the parents are left without their children, and yet nobody is now being held accountable for it. The Chinese Communist Party officials know that after a month, after half a year, or even longer, people will forget all about it. Nobody today is talking about how many people died in 2008. And likely by the end of this year, nobody would be talking about how many people died in the roof collapse. If these tragedies tell us one thing, it is that no matter where you live in China, if you aren't extremely careful, even if you're extremely careful, you will still somehow be the victim to the CCP's iron fist. The iron fist is a term that I think perfectly describes the situation where they don't really give a crap about your livelihood. Not even during normal times, not during a disaster, not ever. Because the only thing that they will do is slam you down with hardship despite everything around you that's already going on. And that's the nicer way to put it. And because we know that in each aftermath, people often examine why. Why did this happen? Many in China look to the eastern neighbor, Japan. Technically, we're speaking about very similar cultural background, Asian ethnic people, somehow a different form of government, regularly experiencing earthquakes in Japan, yet buildings like schools in Japan are the safest buildings. Meanwhile, government buildings in China tends to be the ones that withstand and hold during an earthquake. The ones in Japan, the government buildings are the first to get damaged. A survey after the Wenchuan 2008 earthquake found that the ratio in China of collapsed government offices to collapsed schools was about 1 to 11, meaning one government building collapsed for every 11 school buildings that collapsed. The reason being, of course, we know that in some parts, the construction budget for government offices in China are often much higher than that of the schools in China. There's also things like kickbacks, embezzlements, and bribery involved. If you're a contractor or a manager for a building company and you want to get this project, the first thing you do isn't to go submit an application for it. You go and give that official some money or buy a gift for them, right? That's corruption. And in fact, it's not just that China simply cannot build proper buildings to withstand earthquakes. They can. In fact, they gave a hospital in Nepal an 8.0 magnitude resistant building. And yes, that hospital was fine after an 8.0 magnitude earthquake. So it just shows you that the issue of Tofu Dreg is just a unique CCP-related issue. The 2008 earthquake was not only devastating during the disaster, like many, aftermath was the one that mattered, right? The authorities completely censored and policed the area. Information were not getting out. And so many people investigative journalists or citizen journalists went to jail because they wanted to find out the truth about what really happened. And this is a very common phenomenon across all issues in China. Over the past few years, many people tried to uncover the truth, whether that's related to the Wuhan virus, related to the case with the mother in chain, or in the most recent one, likely with the roof collapse. Somebody is either going to get detained, sent to jail, or they have to flee China because they wanted to uncover the truth. So that means the CCP never actually addressed the Tofu Dreg issue to this day. So like I said in the beginning, to explain why the CCP never bothered to reinforce this issue, like it's not just a construction aspect, right? It's because in the end, the fault will always land on themselves. China's classification standard for seismic defense for construction projects stipulates that low-rise teaching buildings, such as schools, should be classified as Category B in terms of seismic defense. Now, this type of building should adopt the type of multi-story internal frame structure with a better seismic performance against earthquake, and that should be better than ordinary private houses. Now, when an 8.0 magnitude earthquake happens, the Category B buildings should be able to stand with much a higher degree than even that. And this is according to the official requirements for this particular type of building. So according to China's own standards, school buildings in that particular earthquake zone should have been able to withstand an 8.0 magnitude earthquake with some damage, but not a complete collapse. Why would construction workers knowingly make subpar buildings then? Well, then one of the reasons to explain is that they simply are told to do whatever they are told and what materials are given. That's on the heads of the project managers, right? Where they source the material, how much money they're trying to save. They're trying to claw back profit that they used to bribe the officials to get the projects in the first place. Of course, they also have to put some money into their own pockets. In many cases, the CCP politics are involved. Like I said, the developers and the project managers, they work together with the local officials in the Communist Party to make money. Rampant corruption and graft in China results in project money. Essentially, say you have $100,000. 80,000 of that is being used for funds. That 20,000 goes to gifts and bribes. And so now you're short of 20,000 for building materials. Some projects are also given to companies that clearly are tied or have more political affiliations than qualifications. For instance, in 2007, a bridge in Hunan province where work was expedited so that it could open on the 50th anniversary of the founding of the local prefecture actually collapsed during construction, killing 64 people. In China, a lot of these cases happen because they got that project in the first place simply through connections. And things like roads, bridges, or buildings, they also help the local government, would generate a huge amount of revenues from things like land sale or transfer fees. So it's almost like an incentive to work with projects to get them started, to finish faster, to turn them over, to sell more land, which will generate more money in the end for the government. And so they tend to shut one eye for substandard construction projects. So they know that if an investigation really were to truly take place against the Tofu Dreg, it would just be investigations against itself. And we know that they would never let that happen. That's why they just keep everything in the dark. And in the end, the truth always pins the blame on the CCP. And that's really it. It's all about the Chinese Communist Party and how much it has corrupted the Chinese society. All right, that's it today for the episode on Tofu Dreg. And if you enjoy the content, please leave a like and comment below what your thoughts are. Also, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss our latest videos. All right, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.